Well, good evening, and thanks for joining us for another edition of EcoReview. We're live tonight. Write down our number. We're hoping you can call in questions or comments for our panel, 831-425-8844. You'll see that number appear on the screen, but write it down now and you won't be looking for it later on when something pops into mind about a conversation. And I can open tonight by saying we need to do something about traffic. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that, but obviously there are some problems with how we manage traffic. And aside from the fact that maybe we've got to straighten out our road arteries and the way we move the traffic around, you can't help but think when you're sitting in a mass of cars waiting to get to the station to get on time for your program that there's a lot of toxins just rising everywhere around us, a lot of pollution, a lot of emissions, and what a great intro for tonight's program. We have an outstanding panel. We're going to get right to the introductions, and hopefully you'll be inspired to take actions and also to call in with comment and question here. So it is the EcoReview. We're live and also streaming in real time on the internet, so www.communitytv.org/CTV3. You can tell your friends, the TV-less ones, that they can watch and still participate in news that matters. We have a great panel. As I mentioned, we have David Blume. Dave, great to have you back here. And
glad to be here, Tom.
Thanks for co-piloting on an adventuresome spirit to the station here this evening. Dave, you've been all over the country and globe lately talking about ethanol and issues of importance in energy and fuel. But I think we want to come back to you in a couple of minutes and talk specifically about what the benefits and how difficult it is in using ethanol. I know, there's a myriad of solutions, but let's try and focus on transportation kind of closely tonight and look at how we make this work for people. So if you are stuck in traffic, like some of us have been lately, you can breathe and not worry about what you're breathing. We also have Dave Stoltz. Dave's returning to the program. Dave, great to see you again.
It's great to be here.
I think of you as sort of the head mechanic for IIEA fuel conversion projects, and gosh, you're a NASCAR driver and mechanic.
No, not a NASCAR driver. I run dirt cars, sprint cars and midgets and stuff.
Oh, well.
That's how I know so much about alcohol. We run it in those cars.
You were racing. Are you racing this season already?
No, my car is apart and trying to get it back together. I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to work on my car. So
you have two restoration projects. We're going to talk about both of them tonight. I want to start talking a little bit about your Toyota truck, because I think one of the things, Dave, you'll agree, one of the common questions people ask is, well, isn't ethanol hazardous for an older vehicle?
Yeah. Well.
So we have two great examples, the 79 Trans Am with Daryl Hannah and your 84 Toyota that are now totally transformed to run. Although from the work that you did on Daryl's car to your truck, what's different about what you did with the truck?
Well, on Daryl's car, we kind of updated it. We put electronic fuel injection on it and stuff, which doesn't really disprove any. It still proves the point, but I got some people saying, well, yeah, but you updated it. It's really not an old car because you put electronic fuel injection on it. It didn't really matter because it's an old fuel injection system we put on it. The rubber hoses and everything were the same. But on my Toyota, I left it a carburetor. I didn't change nothing on it, just because I want to do that is my test truck. I wanted to disprove things with it and see what really did need to be changed when you added it, put ethanol in it. And so all I did was open the jets up, and that was it, and just started driving it. And
there's no conversion kit or anything?
No conversion kit. You just, on a carburetor, you just drill out the jets and make it run a little bit richer. And I only went 20% bigger on the jets, which made it run great. So I didn't go any further than that. And I didn't want to change anything I didn't need to, because I wanted to see exactly what went wrong. And the only thing that happened, like after a year and a half of driving it on E85, no gasoline at all, just E85, which has gasoline in it. The float sank. The plastic float, I didn't want to, I heard you should coat them with something, but I didn't want to. I wanted to just drill the jets out. That was it. And then when I was driving home at night and it started running really bad, and found out the float just finally got low enough that it started running over. And so I went home, and if you got brass floats, you're okay. It's only the plastic floats that get messed up by the alcohol. And so I went into a hobby store and got some epoxy that's made to use on alcohol for model airplanes and stuff, and painted them up with that, and it's been running ever since, no problems. And I haven't changed any fuel lines, no special treating of the aluminum, nothing. It's just, so I've proved to myself that most of the stuff, all the stuff they've been saying about you can't run it in older cars, proves it wrong. And like I say, they've been running it methanol, which is even worse than ethanol, in race cars since the 1930s. And we've been running it fine. I mean, people can figure out, it's like when they took lead out of gasoline. Everyone, oh no, what are we going to do? They figured out how to make it work. It's not that big a deal. And people don't want to be inconvenienced sometimes with a little bit.
Well, and some slight misinformation sounds like, I'd like to hear your take on that, Dave, too, because, I mean, here you've got all of this experience. You've restored engines or converted engines. We got conversion kits out on cars, but people will still tell you, oh, it eats up hoses, ethanol eats up hoses, it eats up rubber gaskets.
Well, the thing, Tom, is that it's psychological. Next to your house, the most expensive thing you own is your car. So if someone tells you, oh, it's going to hurt your car, you probably won't even try it. And so the oil companies have been working this angle for a long time. Back in the 1930s, the AAA, which is not a public organization, it's a private company, the road service company and the insurance company, was paid by the American Petroleum Institute to tell people that alcohol would absorb water and separate from the gas in the gas tank. And with the oil companies, they put on a series of rigged tests to, in quotes, prove it and, make people really concerned that they'd have a problem. AAA is right there again as the oil company puppet, challenging the validity of only 15% alcohol added to gasoline, saying, oh, no, you can't do that. The government should not, go ahead with that. And it's never been tested. It's never been proven. Ignoring the fact that the EPA tested 20 years worth of vehicles and proved that E15 was just fine. And in fact, little known to the oil companies, they proved at the same time that 30% alcohol was no problem either. So they went all the way back through the point at which auto companies are required to provide spare parts. It's about 26 years, I think. So they proved that all of that is totally tolerant of alcohol. And so, but, you can't believe the millions and millions of sites that refer to AAA, and, you got to trust AAA, about cars, and they're saying, oh, we don't think you should put E50 in your car. Well, for enough money, you can buy the Good Samaritan.
That's a sad statement in so many ways. It is unfortunate that a lot of times the authorities that we look to be representing our interest and acting in our behalf are really influenced greatly by the path of money. And you touched on the E30. We have a phone guest, and I'd like to get Mark Roush online with us. Mark is, as you know, Dave, and I think have you met Mark as well, Dave? Or?
Might have. Yeah, I think so.
He is the co-founder and co-publisher of the Auto Channel, and one of the staunchest advocates out in the media talking about these issues, ethanol as a replacement fuel. And Mark, are you on the line? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, Great. Well, it's a pleasure to have you with us tonight. And of course, you know Dave Blume and have done interviews with Dave in the past, but we have Dave Stoltz with us here tonight too. And Dave, you know, back when we did the smog test at the California smog station, I think you might have met Dave Stoltz at that when we were testing Daryl Hannah's car.
Yeah.
I did, and I have Dave Stoltz on the video that I shot at the same time.
Awesome.
And it's good to see you guys. I'm watching on the stream, so I'm able to see you. And Dave Blume, I envy your tan. It's a beautiful tan.
Well, you know, Mark, I'm Italian, so if I even think about summer, I turn brown.
Good for you.
Now, Mark, you've been tracking this E15, E30 issue, and just so our viewers are familiar with it, how much of an audience, how often are you getting feedback from people at the auto channel, and how much of that is sort of pro or open to ethanol, and how much of that is like, oh no, you can't do that?
Well, I think I'm subject to the same silliness that you guys are, meaning I'll do a story at great length that really details the story of ethanol, the use of ethanol. I'll talk about my own personal use of E85 and high ethanol blends in my own personal car. And so I'll write a story like that, and somebody will then write to me and tell me how I'm going to get less miles, and it's going to destroy my engine, and it's going to do all these terrible things. And I have to, you know, write back to them, and I said, didn't you read the story in which I had said that I've been now driving this car for 30,000 miles and that nothing bad has happened to the car? And in fact, I have to tell you, let me add this if I can. A couple of weeks ago, I think you guys know, I happened to have gone to Washington. I was asked to go to Washington to talk about E15. So what I presented at the Capitol was the report that my own personal car had just had on a smog test. Because as it turned out, I had gotten my Ford Taurus smogged a couple of days before.
And what kind of car?
So the report comes out, and I look at, you know, the fellow comes out, and he tells me, congratulations, you know, it's a baby boy, blah, 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 right? You know, and your car passed. And I asked him to explain the numbers. So he shows me the three categories that the cars are judged by, you know, that the emissions are judged by. And each of the categories, two of the categories I had zero emission, right? So zero carbon monoxide, zero NOx. And in, I'm thinking of
Nitrous oxides.
Nitrous oxide?
Yes. I had, no, nitrous oxide, I had zero. Monoxide, zero. And so in the hydrocarbons, number one, right? Now, the numbers for what would have been passing were things like 372, right? And so I'm at 0, 0, and 1. So I said to the fella, is that good? He said, oh, that's terrific. And I said, do you know why my car would have, you know, showed up like that? He said, well, you must really take good care of it. And so I laughed and I said, no, it's because I use ethanol in the car.
And Mark, you're only using E85 or 85% ethanol, right?
Well, and
you're
yes,
90.
And actually, right, and actually less than that, because I don't always, I have run the car only on E85, but, you know, usually I run it at I would say at about a mix of about E30 to E50, right? Because it sort of depends as I travel and have to use the car. So sometimes I can't find an ethanol station, right? So, or an E85 station, so I have to use more gasoline.
And your car's, what year is it and what type? It's not a flex fuel car, right?
It's not a flex fuel car. It's a 2002 Ford Taurus. And I purposely, although Dave was kind enough to send me one of the kits for the computer, I purposely never installed it. And the reason I did that is I wanted to push the car to the limit. I wanted to see, well, okay, what will happen? How far can I take this without things going? You know, the reason I bought the car was to do personal testing so that I'm not just writing about all the good things that Dave Blume talks about, that you talk about, Tom, and that Dave Stoltz has said to me, right, and so on. And so I wanted to really put my money where my mouth is, and that's why I did it. And I haven't had to put the kit into the engine up to this point.
So what you're saying, Mark, just for the audience, is that you didn't do anything to your car at all, and you're running 85% alcohol, and it's that simple.
It's that simple, but I have to tell you, there is one big problem. And the big problem is that the oil companies are not making as much money from me.
And they know that, Mark.
And they know it. I hope they know it.
Yeah, typically you're looking at 60 cents to $1 cheaper than gasoline when you're using E85. It would be cheaper still if it was 100% alcohol, because that 15% gasoline drives up the price of E85. So for once, doing the right thing by your car and by the environment, because, you know, the numbers you mentioned earlier were better than 99% cleaner than gasoline, and you weren't even using 100% alcohol. You were using a mix of alcohol and gas, but alcohol has so much oxygen in it, it makes the combustion very complete. So here you are, 99% pollution free, no carbon in your engine. Your oil probably doesn't turn black. Your engine life is triple what it's going to be on gasoline. And alcohol's 105 octane, and it's 60 cents to $1 cheaper. I think the oil companies have a real problem here. And so that's why we see billions of dollars spent throwing up doubt in the air to keep people from using it.
I've kind of done the same thing as him. As I got a '89 Chevy motorhome, and my wife has this '94 GMC Jimmy, and we run 50% in them both all the time, you know, with no changes or anything.
How often the hose go, though? They're like every day you have to put new hoses on? Or?
Oh, yeah, we've got a load of a pile of them in the truck. We just change them while we're driving. Nothing has happened to either one of them. They run better. You can feel it when you put the ethanol in them. But and we keep it at 50%, no more than that, because they haven't been, the injection hasn't been altered on them at all.
Now, Mark, what happened when you pushed? I took my car, filled it with E85, and what I had was the check engine light came on, and I had a little pinging, a knock, and I drove a quarter of a tank. My knocking stopped, and I filled with unleaded, and then I drove for another quarter of a tank. The check engine light went out, the knocking had stopped, so I know with my 94 BMW, I can't go beyond a half a tank, but I can do a half a tank readily with it. Is that, what was the limit? Did you get to a limit with your car?
No, not really. I did have an experience where earlier on, I'm now running the car. I try to now run it, as I say, somewhere around between E30, E50, and in that range, the engine check light does not come on. But earlier on, like a year or so ago, at one point when the light went on, I took the car into Meineke, who tells you that they will, you know, they'll check to see why the engine light came on. And the reason I did that was I wanted to see if the report would say, oh, this guy is using ethanol. Right? I was interested to see what the report would look like. But when they did the test, the manager comes out and says to me, oh, your O2 sensor is bad, you're going to have to replace it. And I said, how much does that cost? And he said, $200. And I said, that's okay, I won't do it. He said, but you have to, it's the O2 sensor. And if you leave without, fixing that, you're going to be breaking the law because you're become a gross polluter or something, things to that effect. So I said, no, it's just because I'm using E85 in the car and the light went on. So, it was like I was talking to somebody in a different language because he didn't it didn't register.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, you know, Mark, he wasn't familiar with the concept that your car's diagnostic computer looked at the emissions, and since it didn't fit within a certain range of allowable emissions, it was way too low.
right.
You see, the car's computer, being the simple mind that it is, said, well, something must be wrong because you're outside of what I'm programmed. And so it turns on the light because it's too clean.
Right, right. It didn't register with it. And so I go out, you know, as it happens, I was doing some traveling. I didn't have any E85 stations close by. I wound up putting regular gasoline in again. The light went out. So when I came back home, I took the car back into Meineke, and I said, you know, the light sometimes on, sometimes off. Well, check that again. So they check it. He looks at my records, and he said, well, you know, everything is fine. He said, you must have gotten the O2 sensor replaced. And I said, no. It just went out because I started using regular gasoline again. And so the light eventually went out. And as soon as I start putting in a lot more ethanol, the light will go back on. But it doesn't mean anything. You know, it's a non-event.
Wouldn't it be interesting if that light actually told you when you were polluting rather than when the air was clean coming or the exhaust was clean coming out of the car? That would be an interesting or useful light.
The only thing the light says is something we don't expect is happening, and you need to check it out. So my solution for that, I'm sure, Dave, you've seen people do this, is you just take a little piece of black electrical tape and you put it over the checked engine light. You know?
Or you cut the wire.
But the point is, it's so clean it confuses the computer. So, you know, you would think that this is like some revolutionary new thought, but you have to remember that cars were first run on alcohol. Gasoline wasn't invented yet. Oil wells weren't invented yet. Yet cars were running out there on alcohol with a little bit of turpentine in it. And so when gasoline came along, well, you know, they could kind of make alcohol cars work on gasoline, even though they were dirty and carrying gasoline was explosive and dangerous, but it was the Walmart effect, you know? Wow, I saved 2 cents a gallon using this foul gasoline stuff. And, you know, people are like that. If they save 2 cents, they'll do it. So, you know, that was then. But now, with oil becoming very expensive, and, you know, the United States' biggest oil source isn't even oil. It's tar sands in Canada. You know, we're talking about the bottom of the barrel that we're scraping. I mean, they're fracking out there to get the last
In
drips
Santa Cruz,
of
they're
oil.
talking about.
Oh no, here too. Well, but here's the point: is that alcohol never runs out, ever. Well, you know, it's made of sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. So in 4.5 billion years, the sun will burn out, and then we won't be able to make any more alcohol. But I got a feeling we'll be kind of busy dealing with other things at that point. So alcohol won't ever run out, where oil has to run out. It's a stored product. It doesn't get made anymore. The other thing is it's just the wrong stuff to burn. You know, as we've been talking about pollution, that's a big deal. But, you know, every gallon of fuel that you burn makes 20 pounds. Actually, it's nothing like this size. It's like half the size of this room. 20 pounds of CO2, carbon dioxide.
Gasoline, this is?
And alcohol.
Every gallon of fuel.
Any fuel you burn in a car will generate 20 pounds per gallon of fuel. And the trouble is with gasoline, that fuel was made a long time ago. And when you burn it and release the CO2 into the air, there's no recovery of that CO2 built in. With alcohol, you burn it, it makes 20 pounds, okay. But now the plants, like corn, for instance, right now that we make alcohol from, absorb that CO2 back from the air, combine it with water, glue it together with sunlight, and you have carbohydrates, which we ferment into alcohol. So that 20 pounds is taken out of the air. So there's a cycle. There's no cycle. With fossil fuels, you're taking old stuff, burning it, putting it into the air. So you know, of course, pundits who criticize alcohol say, oh, you don't save any CO2 emissions with alcohol. But you see, you know, the way the oil companies work it is they can lie very well by telling the truth. yes, both vehicles put out 20 pounds of CO2, but if you don't tell the whole story, then you could make this true statement, but it's a lie when you look at what's really going on.
They don't tell the whole story. They just tell the part they want to tell.
Yeah. I talked to an oil company lobbyist once about ethanol fuel subsidies, and I go, "What's with you? You guys are against the subsidies." He goes, "Oh no, we're not against subsidies. We're just against alcohol subsidies."
Yeah.
The oil companies love subsidies.
Yeah.
So what does this mean, though? This new thing has happened. And I'll give you a little bit of history after I tell you what it is, which is the EPA came out a little while ago, buried, just like the oil companies do this stuff, in the very back of an 800-page document outlining our new energy policy. And the EPA said, and all the fuel in the United States should be 30% alcohol, not 10%, which is what it is now. And that eliminates any of the problems that are supposedly due to alcohol, and it will clean up our air by some huge percentage and reduce our imports by a lot. How much would it reduce our imports? Well, 30% of our total oil supply is what we get from Arabia. I mean the whole Persian Gulf. So if we have E30, we don't have to protect any oil routes or any oil wells or go to Iraq because somehow our oil got under their sand. You know, all that goes away because the 30% that used to come from the Middle East is no longer needed. Where does it come from then if it's not coming from the Middle East? It comes from the Midwest right now. In other words, farmers produce the plants that make the alcohol that goes in our cars. So instead of an 11,000-mile round trip for a tanker to deliver the black stuff to us, we only have a very short distance to deliver alcohol from where it's made in the United States to where it needs to go. So all around, we save a huge amount of money and pollution. I mean, bunker oil that they run diesel, tankers on are responsible for 15% of the world's pollution. Just delivering the oil is polluting.
But that didn't get equated in there. Mark, what was the result of your presentation in D.C.? What happened there?
They let me leave, and I came home. Nothing.
They let you leave.
There was no result from the perspective that any laws changed. Mostly the people who were at the meeting were the staffers who advised the congressmen and the senators, and it has to do with the whole thing about overturning renewable fuel standards and things like that. And I would say, interestingly, after the first speaker, I was the cleanup speaker, if you will. After the first speaker, there was a fellow from the oil industry who was an attorney, and he got up to challenge some of the points. And the first speaker handled it quite well and so on, and he sat down. And I was sure that he was going to challenge me because my whole presentation, frankly, was very, very confrontational from the perspective, because, I'm not very confrontational kind of a guy. But, in this case I was, right? Anyway, but it was very confrontational, and I really hit home on the lies that have been told by the oil industry over 140 years, 30 years, And so I was really expecting to hear from him, because he hung around, the attorney hung around afterwards, but he never came even close to talking to me. And, I'm a little guy, so it's not like physically I'm a challenging person. But he never came to talk to me. And I thought, well, perhaps they'll send me a nasty letter or something. But they haven't said a word, and I don't think, they don't really even want to acknowledge, because then it'll be, I guess they figure it'll give credence to what I was saying.
I'm going to ask you one quick question, and then we're going to let you go because we have to open up our phone lines in case people have questions and ideas. It's so good to speak with you, though, Mark, and I hope people are following the Auto Channel. You can find him online. Give us your URL, Mark.
www.theautochannel.com.
And you've been publishing how long?
We've been online since '95.
Awesome.
We are the largest automotive information resource in the world, and the company has been in existence since '87. We've been doing videos since the late '80s.
Wow, you're in parallel with the EcoReview. My crew, some of our team here, we've been doing this since September of '95. So awesome. But last question for you is E30. If E15 was the bloodbath it was, how difficult is E30 going to be to get past?
Well, it was very interesting. The study that David was just talking about is a really interesting story, a study. It's 1,000 pages long. I've been trying to read it. I think it'll be difficult to get it through. I think we need people to experiment, like how I've been experimenting, find out for themselves, and they have to be screaming at the Congress people and the senators and get them on board and make it happen. It's a good thing. It would be the greatest thing that could happen to the United States if we could get rid of this oil nonsense.
Oh, so good for you to call in, Mark. And I want you to stay tuned because Dave Stoltz is going to talk a little bit about another restoration project as well as his Toyota car that he's been working on. And I think you're going to flip out when you hear about this one. I mean, it's really exciting. But
I'd like to conclude this current thought about E30 and the EPA. A lot of us who are environmentalists or ecologists have been frankly disappointed over the decades with the EPA because we think, they're not really doing a good job of protecting the planet, and sometimes we call them the Environmental Pollution Agency and all that. But that's not true when it comes to alcohol. The oil companies challenged E15. They first charged the Renewable Fuel Standard. They went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the EPA said no, and the oil companies had to back down. Then E15, 15% alcohol approval was going to happen, and the oil companies forced them to go back and study all the cars going back to way back. And then they finished that and implemented E15, even though the oil companies fought hard and had all kinds of press against it. Then they sued the EPA for implementing E15, even though, they had gone through all this process, and the EPA prevailed over that. And then recently, there's been during the drought, the oil companies tried to get the Renewable Fuel Standard, the basic law that requires putting clean fuel in with gasoline. They tried to get that removed, and the EPA said, nope, we're not going to change it. So, Mark is saying congressmen and senators and all that, but you got to realize that the Washington bureaucracy is more stable than our politicians. Politicians come and go. Bureaucracy is forever. So there's a lot of people in the EPA who were here in the 1980s when it looked like we were going to sweep the whole country and move to alcohol. And they are not amused at the shenanigans the oil companies have been putting in their face for the last 6-7 years. And so University of Minnesota's done all these E30 studies. The whole country of Brazil, you cannot buy gasoline with less than 25% alcohol in it. It's like, how much more proof do you need? And I know in Brazil they don't use cars like we do. They have all these weird little companies like Ford and GM and,
I've heard a couple of those.
little known companies. But no, all the cars in Brazil, they cannot buy gasoline at less than 25% alcohol.
They also run at 100% ethanol on most of the cars down there. I was there.
That's right.
Yeah.
95% of the new cars in Brazil are meant to run on 100% alcohol. And if you don't have a 100% alcohol car, people slap on one of the kits that we sell, and now they can run 100% alcohol, but everybody would run at least 50. So there's so much worldwide proof, they count on the the people in America not knowing what's going on in the rest of the world to propagate the lie that there's any question that alcohol could run their vehicles. So I believe this E30 mandate that the EPA is proposing is trying to put the oil companies in their place once and for all. Because once this happens and there's no choice about buying gasoline without alcohol, everyone will finally accept that alcohol is a normal fuel, just like the rest of the world has. And once that happens, E30 is only the beginning. It's the beginning of the end of the oil companies. So it will be a multi-billion-dollar propaganda campaign against alcohol, which, you know, might discourage some people, but on our side, we don't have a lot of advantages except this really tiny one called the truth, you know? And so how does the truth get spread? Me to you, you to Dave, Dave to someone else, and you know, you just say to someone, you've been lied to by the oil companies, and this stuff really works. It works everywhere. It's always worked. And you know, prove it to yourself. Go on the Alcohol Can Be a Gas website, find your local alcohol station and put a gallon in the tank. And if your car doesn't explode, well, heck, it's just fine, isn't it? But I think where we're going next is people starting to make alcohol in their communities and small businesses and selling it at a couple of stations. And now the money from your community stays in your community. Instead of swipe your card at the Chevron station and bang, your money goes overnight to a Swiss bank account, leaving America. We all been seeing what happens the last few years when capital is not available for business to expand and whatever. When you send it all to Switzerland, it's not available here. If it's a local alcohol station, local people growing crops for alcohol or taking waste products from, you know, sugar and starchy waste products from other industries that would otherwise go to waste, and that alcohol circulates throughout the community and the money circulates throughout the community, it's amazing. You ought to see dead towns in the Midwest have come totally back to life because there's an alcohol plant nearby and a lot of people are employed. Those employed people spend money on goods and services in the town, and those people are employed. And so suddenly, these boarded up storefronts and these dead plazas in these little Midwest towns, boom, it's like a new world. It's like things are going well. And, you know, you don't see those pictures. The other pictures you don't see are the disasters by the oil companies. There was a pipeline explosion in the tar sands pipeline they're building from Canada to Texas because there's no oil left in Texas and those refineries have nothing to refine.
Arkansas.
Sorry, Arkansas.
Yeah.
And the minute that pipeline went, it covered a town in a combination of gasoline-like solvent and tar. A whole town. No one can live there ever again. It's totally toxic. And guess what? You would be hard-pressed to find any stories or pictures about that because immediately a no-fly zone was dropped over the area.
By the oil company.
No, by the U.S. government at the request of the oil companies, just like they learned.
The BP did in the Gulf.
They learned that in the Gulf. There were all these horrible pictures coming out of the Gulf, and so they got the government to make it a no-fly zone. So that's how powerful they are. They can stop you from seeing the truth. Seeing is believing, you know, and so if you could see this town covered with oil, and the oil company's attitude was, well, you can move, you know. Wait a minute, and there's a pipeline break every business day, every year in the United States. 5 days a week, a new pipeline blows out. And they're telling us that this new high pressure, high temperature solvent tar pipeline to go to special refineries in Texas, top technology
from Canada
never
to
happened.
Texas.
From Canada to Texas, sorry.
Yeah.
Has already blown twice, and it's not even in, you know, just in short sections that they've built. So, you know, that's how desperate the oil companies are to keep product coming into their refineries. And if we start making alcohol and there's no market, like E30 wipes out a big part of the market, you know, and people start running straight alcohol, that's the way to win. I mean, we can't have a revolution like Che Guevara. We can't get out there and, start having armed conflict because they have better guns, But the way you can win is you just don't give them your money and they shrivel up and die. So that's how we win. We make alcohol, we the people, for the people, making our own fuel in our communities. And, I've dedicated a big part of my personal assets to forming a company to build small business-sized alcohol systems, that's Blume distillation, where people will be able to make a darn good living making alcohol and selling it to their community. And, it's a very practical thing. I mean, making alcohol is really mankind's second oldest profession, so it's not exactly high tech. It's moonshine, right? And so what we're doing is high-tech moonshining, or more appropriate tech moonshining, but on the smallish scale, less than 5 million gallons a year.
We're going to take a call, Dave. Caller, Jackie, are you on there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
I'm wondering, I didn't know anything about the problems that have just occurred, but I'm wondering, first of all, where in Santa Cruz area can someone purchase alcohol fuel for their vehicle? The second question I've got is, I've got a sister out in Connecticut who owns a marina, and she has had several of their customers, the people who rent slips from them, have problems with their boats. And she's been very concerned, and she's been calling me and asking me, what can they do? They've been being told by mechanics that it's, oh my goodness, the problem of alcohol fuel. Any increment of alcohol fuel in the lines is what is causing boat problems. They've had to be towed. They've had to have engines overhauled. Do you have any ideas about that? I'll listen online. Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you so much for the call. And Dave, let's take from a mechanic's perspective. You've converted airplanes?
No, I talked to a guy about doing it. He was real interested in doing it and stuff. We talked quite a bit about it, but it never happened.
What do you think of that, a problem with boats?
Well, I don't think there can't be a problem. People, if they run alcohol in their vehicle and something goes wrong that would have gone wrong anyway, or something happened, they instantly think it's because of the alcohol. And I've had things happen on all my cars that
we're just running gasoline.
From running ethanol. And if somebody who didn't know enough, they go, oh, I'm not going to put that back in there, it caused this problem. But it would have happened anyway. It's things happen. Cars break down. But the thing is that on the boat deal, I would verify it. Take fuel lines loose, take fuel filters loose, check things out. I bet they'll find another problem with it.
I have a boat. So, believe me, in fact, I have a sailboat. And the only problem with a sailboat is it has a motor. All the problems in the sailing world have to do with that dang motor. Now, what's the problem? Well, where are you if you're in a boat? You're near the water. So the air around a boat is saturated with water. It's just high humidity at water level. So your gas tank is not perfectly sealed. It has, as the fuel goes up and down, or the day is hot or cold, there's expansion and contraction, you have to be able to let air in and out of the tank. If you let moisture-filled air into the tank, and it's a gasoline fuel, gasoline and water don't mix, not well. And so the moisture that comes in condenses to the metal sides of the tank, flows to the bottom of the tank, and there's a pool at the bottom of a gasoline motor's fuel tank that's this sludge of water and some of the components of gasoline. But the fuel pickup, where you pull the fuel from, because boat builders know this, is several inches above where that sludge forms. So you can run a boat for years with an inch of sludge in the bottom and never notice a problem. Then you put alcohol in, and things change. because alcohol is a solvent for all that sludge. Like, it cleans out your engine, right? As we said earlier, part of that is a solvent action that removes the gums, the tars, the varnish that coat everything in your fuel system. And that sludge in the bottom now doesn't stay in the bottom. It mixes up with the gasoline because of the alcohol, and then it heads right for your fuel filter and plugs up the fuel filter. That's the primary problem in boats with alcohol, and you'll hear this story right after a marina switches to 10% or 15% alcohol. But a month later or 2 months later, there's no story anymore because everybody's tank has been cleaned out.
That's what happened with my truck.
Right.
Exactly. The first few 100 miles, I had the fuel filter plugging up. And what it was just what David said. The old,
Were you doing E85s?
Yeah, only. That's all I run in my truck because it's
And
a
where did
carburetor.
you find it? Because that was the other question from the caller. Where do you find it
The
around
closest place
here?
you can buy it from here is right over the hill in San Jose. There's about 3 stations in San Jose that sell it, and I just got a bunch of 5-gallon jugs. Lasts me about a month. I got 6 5-gallon jugs. I fill the truck up and fill my jugs up. It lasts me about a month. And I'm going through there enough that I just fill them out. It's a pain, and I keep talking to Propel Fuels and then people about getting a station here in Santa Cruz, but it's tough, you know.
Well,
you almost had one, didn't you, at one time?
I had a $175,000 grant from the state of California to put an alcohol station here in Santa Cruz. I had a site approved by the redevelopment agency for us to put the station on. But then that person at the redevelopment agency retired. And then things got complicated because you see, our grant that we won, the $175,000, beat out other departments in the city that wanted to buy Priuses with grant money. But, you know, it's all based on points, how much pollution you solve, a little tiny Prius engine switching over, you know, I mean, it's not much saved. But, you know, the people in the department wanted to drive Priuses around town, right? And they needed money for that. We got the money for the station because it would save tons of pollution, right? So basically, bureaucracy is forever and politicians come and go. The bureaucracy basically arranged to steal our grant and buy their Priuses. So, you know, politics, what can you say? If we had used private money, you know, just, you know, people who wanted to lend us money or whatever, we would have had an alcohol station up here in Santa Cruz 6-7 years ago. I mean, we had a unanimous approval by the city of Santa Cruz supervisors, or I guess they're the supervisors of the city of Santa Cruz. They 100% voted for it. But see, Santa Cruz is not run by the supervisors; it's run by the city manager, and that's something people don't know about politics in America. About half of the cities have a strong council, and they run the city. And the other half of the cities have this shadowy system in which the council can only set policy, but the city manager actually implements and does everything. And they have ultimate power. And so we happen to have a city that isn't democratic, or, you know, that's how it goes.
I heard that you actually were running a mobile station. You'd go to the racetrack with a 55-gallon drum of fuel and provide it for people that wanted to try their car on alcohol.
we were going. I had it all set up to do that and to run the sprint cars and the midgets on ethanol instead of methanol, and it was a big advantage. The thing I sold that on is they could get better mileage with the ethanol, produce the same horsepower, and less weight lights racers' eyes up. When you say it's going to weigh less, and putting less fuel in there to run a race means weight, and that meant a lot. It was more about that than anything else, you know. And you know, horsepower, speed, that's all they care about. But yeah, it was
105 octane.
Yeah, well, pure ethanol, I think it's 107, I think, isn't it?
And then there's the blending octane. If you mix it with gasoline, it has a bigger effect than if you run it by itself. It's 118 octane if you consider the blending numbers. So if you take gasoline at 87 and you mix it with an equal amount of alcohol, you take 87, add it to 118, and then divide by 2.
Right.
So your your octane is still very, very high. And that's because alcohol reacts with certain parts of gasoline that
We don't wanna
give
run
the gasoline higher. But who wants to mix that
Yeah, I don't
gasoline
wanna
stuff with
put
their
gasoline.
alcohol? You know?
I wanted to say one thing about something that really frustrates me about my people, the hot rod people, and
We're running down on time, and I want to hear this, Dave.
Well, real quick is I keep seeing articles in car magazines, Hot Rod, Rod and Custom, all these magazines, and these guys keep bad-mouthing ethanol, and it drives me crazy. I mean, we know how to fix things, we know how to make things work and stuff, and they're falling for all these lies. It drives me crazy.
Dave, it's worse than that. Take a look at those magazines and who advertises in those magazines.
Yeah, well,
buy Chevron with Tetraline, buy Exxon, a Tiger in your tank.
But these guys should be thankful that there's ethanol because that's the only alternative fuel they can still run in their old cars. They go to, propane and all this other stuff. Their old jalopies aren't going to be able to run on ethanol with a little bit of adjustment. Can run in all them old cars.
You and I totally agree on that, but where the oil companies are going as oil runs out, is they want to take coal and make gasoline. They want to take oil shale from the Rockies and make synthetic gasoline. They want to take trees in the Southwest.
They're all going to run out of it all eventually.
Well, the thing is, but they're not going to let alcohol out of the bag if they can keep making synthetic gasoline for a little longer.
Right.
There's so many interesting truths about ethanol and alcohol fuel, and I hope you'll take the time, explore David Blume's work, alcoholcanbeagas.com. Dave Stoltz, I want you back on to talk about your Duesenberg. I thought we'd get to that tonight. He's doing restoration projects that are mind-boggling, and in August, you get to unveil that. Mm-hmm. We want you back to show us the car and talk about how the first Duesenberg is operating now. Would it run ethanol?
I talked to him about it. I don't think they'll go for it.
Could it have in his time? Was it?
Well, actually, it spent its life in Hawaii. It was the owner of the car was C&H Sugar Company.
Oh, they were making alcohol.
And so.
We're gonna follow up on this. Thank you for tuning in, and next time you're in the traffic, think about clean fuel. Have a great night, Dave. That just seems really piece of ground, and I call it my own. Call it my own. Call it my own. I got a tiny piece of ground, and I call it my own. It's a home for the big old redwood tree. You know the loggers may not like it, but I call it my own. Call it my own. Call it my own. You know the loggers may not like it, but I call it my own.